All right, let's talk about something truly remarkable. The fine art of being catastrophically, almost breathtakingly terrible at your job and still climbing the corporate ladder. We're about to dive into a masterclass in failing upwards, and our guide is, without a doubt, a gold medal champion of incompetence.
It's a genuinely baffling question, isn't it? I mean, really, how does someone whose resume just screams war hero, ace pilot, top-tier expert become a one-man wrecking ball aimed squarely at his own side? Well, buckle up, because we're going to follow that journey from celebrated ace to, well, to absolute disaster.
And look, you can see why they hired him. On paper, the man's a legend, a celebrated World War I fighter ace, the guy who took over from the Red Baron himself. He was given the keys to what would become one of the most powerful air forces on the planet. I mean, seriously, what could possibly go wrong?
Oh, right, this guy. Hermann Göring, the human embodiment of a participation trophy. A man whose actual job performance was so wildly disconnected from his qualifications that it's almost a comedy. Almost.
Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty. And we start with a problem as old as time, the so-called expert who hasn't had a new idea since the invention of the toaster. This is where the whole rotten structure begins to wobble.
And here we have it, a direct quote straight from the horse's mouth. This was Göring's actual logic. He didn't care about strategy or range or effectiveness. He just wanted a big, juicy number to show off to his boss. It's the military equivalent of buying 1,000 cheap toy cars instead of one actual working car. Completely and utterly clueless.
So this was the actual choice on the table. You've got option A, a fleet of planes that could actually, fly far enough to hit important enemy targets. And then there's option B, a gigantic swarm of glorified lawnmowers with wings that were basically useless for the job at hand. He picked the lawnmowers. Why? Because thousands sounds way more impressive than 1,000. It's just moronic.
And here is the punchline. 18 years. That's the gap between Göring, the World War I flying ace, and Göring, the guy in charge of a modern air force. In aviation terms, that's like asking a guy who rode a horse to design a Formula One car. He was a fossil, completely convinced he was still the smartest guy in the room.
So what did this expertise get them? Well, take a look. An absolute unmitigated catastrophe. They achieved basically nothing they set out to do, and the number of German planes and pilots lost was just staggering. This wasn't just a mistake, it was a direct result of choosing vanity over victory.
So, moving on. Now, when you're this spectacularly bad at your job, you really only have two choices. You can, 1, learn from your many mistakes and try to get better, or 2, you can just get rid of anyone smart enough to point out you're a blithering idiot. Take a wild guess which path our boy Hermann chose?
Yep, you guessed it. Göring had his eye on the defense minister job, but there was a small problem. A genuinely brilliant general named Werner von Fritz was the obvious choice. So what does our hero do? He completely fabricates a homosexuality scandal, a career killer back then, and has the guy disgraced and fired. The man who replaced him? A political yes-man who promptly had a fatal heart attack during the Battle of Moscow, one of the most critical moments of the entire war. Just brilliant.
And the best part? The absolute cherry on top of this garbage sundae. After all that, Göring didn't even get the job. So he successfully torpedoed his own military's leadership structure for absolutely nothing, a true masterclass in petty, self-destructive politics.
Which brings us to the big, flashing, neon question. If this guy was so unbelievably bad at his job, why on earth did he keep it for so long? How was he not fired? Well, the answer lies in something he and his boss were both absolutely obsessed with.
Fascist aesthetics. Basically, it's the philosophy that looking powerful is way more important than actually being powerful. Hitler, remember, was a failed artist. He was obsessed with how things looked. The grand rallies, the sharp uniforms, the whole spectacle. And Hermann Göring, well, he understood the assignment perfectly. He knew it was all about the performance. So, while a world war was raging, this was Göring's to-do list. He wasn't poring over supply chain reports. He was designing himself new, ever more ridiculous outfits. He wasn't strategizing, he was looting the great art museums of Europe to decorate his gaudy palace. His entire focus was on looking the part, not doing the job.
And the contrast is just wow. While Göring was picking out drapes, this is what the actual German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, was worried about. Little things, like having enough fuel to fly, having planes that actually worked, a general desire not to be shot out of the sky. One of these lists is about pure vanity, the other is about life and death.
So, where does this road paved with stolen art and incompetence lead? I think we all know the answer. It doesn't end with a ticker-tape parade. It ends with a pathetic, delusional whimper that is, in its own way, the perfect ending.
You want to talk about a disconnect from reality? Look at this. He genuinely, truly believed he was going to be the next Führer, celebrated as a national hero. The reality, of course, was being arrested by his own side, universally despised, and put on trial for his life. The gap between his ego and the truth was just astronomical.
And this is the final, pathetic image. As everything was collapsing, Göring was literally holed up in his ridiculous palace, morbidly obese, decked out in a velvet robe, just looking at his stolen paintings and waiting for a phone call from Hitler telling him he was in charge. The delusion was absolute, right up until the very end, when the call that came was the order for his arrest.
Göring's story might seem like some bizarre, dark comedy from a history book. But it's also a pretty timeless and frankly terrifying warning about what happens when the show of power becomes more important than the substance of leadership. Which really leaves you with one final nagging question, doesn't it?